In the past year alone, it has become a Republican Party priority to enact invasive legislation specifically targeting trans people. In Florida, several laws took effect last week, keeping teachers, faculty, and students from using the pronouns of their choice, restricting bathroom choice, and cracking down on drag shows by threatening to revoke liquor licenses of businesses that allow minors into adult live performances, though that specific measure has also been blocked in court for now. In Texas, Republicans also passed a bill banning, quote, sexually oriented performances, aka drag shows, in the presence of minors. Nearly 500 bills have been proposed in state legislatures across the country, aiming to restrict everything from pronouns to participation in school sports. All of it is part of a national conservative anti-woke crusade, a vast, multifaceted effort that takes aim at everything from private sector inclusion efforts to the teaching of history. Joining me now is Sarah McBride, who became the country's first openly transgender state senator when she won a seat on the Delaware State Senate as a Democrat in the year 2020. And she is now running for the U.S. Congress, where if she wins, she would make history once again as the first trans person ever elected to Congress. Senator McBride, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So the numbers are staggering. Just the uptick in these anti-trans laws, legislations, the ideas of ways in which you can punish a whole community of people. Why do you think this is happening now? Is it fear? Is it strategy? Is it both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think right now the extreme Republican Party is trying to distract from the fact that they have absolutely no agenda for workers and families across the country. They're seeking to win elections by dividing and conquering. This is not a new strategy for them. This is a strategy they have used throughout history to seek to distract from their policy failures and to seek to drive wedges between voters. But ultimately, I think these types of policies may drum up passion among a small part of the ever-shrinking Republican base. But the reality is they are so out of touch with what is actually keeping voters up at night. And I think that while these policies are central to their message right now, what we'll see in 2024 is what we saw in 2022, which is that these attacks ring hollow. And on top of that, they just don't wear well in history.
And I agree with you in terms of the being on the right side of history, the wrong side of history. I wonder how you see it as part of the broader portfolio of the anti-woke crusade. You know, we tried to play some sound in the last block of the state superintendent of public education, who is saying that the Tulsa race massacre cannot be taught taking race into consideration. It actually says to say it was inherent that the massacre happened because of the color of their skin is critical race theory, right? You're talking about facts, history, and trying to literally whitewash what happened in the state. That is happening, that disenfranchisement, if you will, in terms of the teaching of history, the idea of reparations. That is happening across the board with everybody who is not a white, straight male, right? Whether it's women and bodily autonomy, whether it's a trans community, the LGBTQ plus community, people of color. There is a very virulent and powerful crusade that seems in a lot of ways to be successful. And I think that it feels like it's born less out of strategy and more out of a palpable fear that the country is changing.
I think there's, without question, a fear by Republican politicians about the demographic changes in this country. Yeah. And I think there's certainly a fear among some people about the changing demographics of this country. And I think what you've just articulated is a very clear example of the through line between all of these attacks. And I do think that it reinforces just how inextricably linked the fight for LGBTQ equality is with the fight for racial justice, with the fight for reproductive rights. Because ultimately, what we're seeing is an attempt to censor these topics out of our schools. What we're seeing is an attempt to roll back the clock on our progress and ultimately make this country less hospitable for people of color, for LGBTQ people, for women to thrive in and live in.
What does it personally feel like, right? On one hand, you could be making history, which feels like a big step forward. And then you hear about what's happening at the state level, and it feels insanely retrograde. I mean, how do you think about this moment as a trans person? And how do you think about whether the moral arc of the universe and which direction it's bending in?
There is no question that the process toward progress in this country is not a linear process. It's often 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But I have seen too much change in my life to lose hope right now. Since coming out 10 years ago, I've seen more hearts and minds change. I've seen laws, pro-LGBTQ rights laws, pass around this country. My service in the Delaware State Senate would not have been comprehensible to me as a child. I have seen too much change to lose hope now. But I think ultimately, there are few things that can help to diversify the narrative of who LGBTQ people are than having an out trans member of Congress who's not just focused on trans rights, who's focused on all of the issues that matter: affordable early childhood education, paid family and medical leave, gun safety, reproductive rights. That helps to reinforce for people that trans people are part of the rich diversity of our country and that we have something to offer when we get to the table.
Yeah, it will be a good day when they just refer to you as Congresswoman, and that's it. No explanation about your history-making role.
And I will say that what I have seen throughout the last several years is that voters are fair-minded. They are judging candidates based on ideas, not on their identities. And I will just say, in the last 2 weeks of this campaign, the number of people who have visited SarahMcBride.com to sign up to volunteer, to donate, has been incredibly empowering for me. And I know over the next year and a half of this campaign, we'll continue to demonstrate that voters care more about who's going to deliver for them than they do a candidate's gender.
You are living through the change. Sarah McBride, Democratic State Senator, thanks for your time tonight. Good luck out there. We'll be watching.
Thank you.